Hello, everybody. This is Stacie. I'm here with Leah Clapper for another Lessons with Leah. And happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day to you too. I know when the people listen to this, it's not gonna be
It
Valentine's
won't
Day
be
yet.
Valentine's Day anymore. You're right. But it is
But I
today when
hope
we record.
I hope everyone has an amazing Valentine's Day and an amazing Friday when they listen to it, or
Yeah,
whatever day it is.
whatever day you happen to listen to it. I love Valentine's Day. It's always like the commercialism or whatever of it, but I just love the idea of focusing in on love. Love for yourself, love for other people. I feel like it's such an amazing way to live. And so it's a fun day to kind of reset and remember like this is what I want to be focused on every day is loving myself and loving others.
I
So,
love that.
yeah. All right, what do you want to coach on today?
Well, I'm sure there are a million options that we can talk about. I'll give a quick recap of the past week since we had our last recording. So, Beam this past week has gone much better. I've been much more consistent and I have been nailing a good 95% of my routines, which is back up to a normal amount. And yeah, had some good days over there.
That's
Floor has been going along until yesterday. I had a little bit of a funky day, and I think that's something that we can coach on because what
yeah.
happened to me definitely happens to other gymnasts. So, I switched my last pass for a little bit of context here to a 1.5 front layout, and I have been doing that pass for a while, many years, but it's never been my star tumbling pass, and I wanted to make it better because they've been going okay, I've been making them all, but kind of poorly,
Okay.
and I was like, "I need to make a change, I need my 1.5 to go higher, so then my layout goes higher, but I can't tip it over too much because then I'll go straight to the floor," and so I did some different warm-up things and different drills before I started. I was like, I'm gonna fix it today."
Yeah.
And then it started going downhill. I was trying so hard to make a change, I
Yeah.
started getting so confused, and then I started getting lost. I was like, "I don't know where my head is at," and I did some shlabams on the floor, and it just was not going well, and I was like, "Wow, I need to cut myself off because everyone is getting worse, and we need
Yeah.
an intervention here to
Yeah.
make this better." But I finished the rest of my floor assignment and did my routines with a different pass, and then I went to beam, and I was just feeling like, "Oh my gosh, I'm all over the place today," because I
Yeah.
had done so many bad things on floor, and I felt all floppy and out of control of my body. And I was like, "How am I gonna have a good beam day today? I'm gonna curse splat
Mm.
over here. This is the worst practice I've had in a really long time. Just things aren't going well. I'm off. It's fine." I was kind of laughing about it, but I was also like, "This is going really badly."
Yeah.
But I was able to tell myself that, "Okay, maybe that's not exactly true," and
Equal
I
airtime.
yes, I tried to remind myself, I was like, "Maybe I just was trying too hard on that one skill, and I'm not all messed up in the head, and I can still have a good beam day. It was just the one skill that was going bad." And I ended up having a fabulous beam day. I nailed 5 routines in a row, and it was definitely a step towards, elevating my confidence.
Yeah.
Great. The problem did appear from my 1.5 on the floor. Well, I couldn't do it as my dismount either on beam. I got so lost. And I told my coach that I was feeling like I needed to take a step back on those today.
Yeah.
And could I do them separately from my routines and work on them afterward because I just felt like I was all messed up. And she was like, "Yeah, absolutely, let's do that." And after Beam, I went over and I did some drills, and I think I fixed myself. I didn't do the actual skill anymore, but that was the turn of events yesterday at practice, and I know that that's super common to get, like, confused on a skill you know how to do, and
Yeah.
dealing with that, I'm sure you have tons of thoughts.
Absolutely. Well, so let's coach on 2 separate things. One on just, like, dealing with a bad day. I love that. Let's totally coach on that. And then the other, this is something that you and I don't hardly ever do because you have all your skills, but this is like my bread and butter, coaching on a skill. We do this day in, day out. So then let's actually do some coaching on the skill.
Let's do it.
So let's start with coaching on the skill because that one's just a little bit easier and quicker. Here's what we always suggest starting with is what are 5 things that you think are important for you to do to get your 1.5 high and all the way around?
So,
Because you were trying to make it higher,
I
right?
was trying to make it higher, but less all the way around,
But
if
less
that
all the
makes
way
sense,
around
because
so that
I'm
you
doing a round off, back 1.5, front layout,
okay,
and my 1.5s were being low, but somehow I was still landing with my feet behind me and my front layout was low, so it was, like, low, low, and I want it
okay.
to be high, high,
Yep. So
and more
what
round.
are let's go 5 things that you think, like, actual actions you need to take in order to make that happen.
Yeah, I need to have a controlled run of appropriate speed and
What is
power.
that?
Medium.
Medium.
So, not lackadaisical, but I'm definitely not going full force into it.
Yeah.
And then I need to turn my round off over
Yep.
in the correct way. I might actually need coaching on that, where how much I should turn my round off over and, like, where my body position should be.
Yes.
But I know that sometimes I do my round off with my feet apart,
Okay.
and that makes it ugly and lower. So, I need to have my feet together in my round off. And then I need to
You're doing
set
round off full and a half?
yeah,
'Kay.
and
Not
then I
round off
need
back handspring full and a half, round off full and a half.
right.
'Kay. Just
I
getting my
need
brain in the right space. Keep
yes.
going. Cool.
I need to set my arms up instead of tipping my shoulders back. But I also need to whip it some instead of going straight up, straight down. So it's this weird medium of going up and going back
Yep.
for the right dynamics of the skill. I need to stay tight during the 1.5 with my feet together. And
How do
then
you wanna end your 1.5? Like, where show me with your hand what your body position where you want it to be to end your 1.5 before your front layout.
almost straight up and down, a
Almost
little
straight up
bit
and down?
behind. I
And
think
you're
that makes sense to me.
yeah, feet in front of you slightly, right?
Yeah,
Because to set, you need your feet in front or behind. So for forward, you need your feet a little slightly in front of you, right? So
yeah,
when we do a full and a half rotation, we end on the opposite way that we started. So
kind
like
yeah.
let's do a full and a half turn on beam. If
Oh, turning
like
wise, yes.
turning wise, just turning wise, yes. So you're gonna
Mhm.
wanna start your full and a half the exact slight opposite of where you wanna end it. So
True.
if you wanna start here, you wanna end here. Sorry, if you wanna
Yeah.
end here, you wanna start here. Does that make
So my
sense?
round off is a little bit
You're gonna get
less
your
than
feet under
also
you just a little, but not a ton probably, because if you wanna be
right.
more right on top, right? And you're probably used to your star passes have been your back tumbling passes, right? Your
Yeah.
double
Uh-huh,
pike?
doubles, yeah.
Yeah. So your round off for that is getting your feet underneath you, turning your round off way over and getting those feet way underneath you. But
Yeah,
when you're not adding the back handspring, you actually need to end your round off the way you would normally end your back handspring.
right.
Does that make sense? So where
Yeah.
would you normally for a great like if you were gonna do round up back handspring full and a half, where would you end your back handspring? Feet slightly behind you?
Yeah,
So that's where we wanna go with our round off, right?
right.
Okay.
Yes.
So we want our feet slightly behind us. We wanna have a controlled run. We want our feet together. We wanna set with our arms up, whip it over, and stay tight.
Yeah, and then I need to keep my feet together on my front layout, which is the
Squeeze.
second skill.
And how do you so here's one of the super important things. Your brain wants specifics. Like, tell me exactly what I need to do. I don't have the time to translate. So, how do you actually keep your feet together?
Squeeze my thighs together and think about I usually think about getting my toes together, and that automatically makes my whole legs go together.
Perfect. Whatever works for you. But for all gymnasts listening, usually telling yourself to squeeze your thighs is actually how you accomplish putting your feet together. And a lot of times, gymnasts spend a lot of times telling their brain, put my feet together. And your brain's like, ha, focused on your feet. And the actual muscle that puts your feet together is squeezing your inner thighs. So
Yeah,
sometimes the more specific we can give our brain instructions, the better we're going to get. So, okay,
that's a
so going
point.
back to our full and a half, our specific instructions we're giving to our brain is a medium run, turning your round off over, feet slightly behind you, feet together, set arms up, whip it, some stay tight. Of all those things, what do you think the most important thing you need to do is?
It's probably the round off or the set because
Okay.
everything else takes care of itself.
Yeah. Yeah. If you had to choose, would you choose round off or set?
Well, I was thinking about the set
Okay.
yesterday, and normally that's what I focus on, and it hasn't been working for me very well. So maybe we'll try the round off approach.
Yeah. So I think listeners at home can't see this, but I want you to imagine a pencil with an eraser on the end, right? And wherever you land that eraser, it's not gonna show it, but it's gonna bounce straight up wherever it lands. So if you land
Yeah,
the eraser, it takes care of the set.
yeah,
Does that make sense? So
for
figuring out where our feet land in the round off and our body shape there, getting that will totally take care of the set for you.
right.
That make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's focus in on feet slightly behind us in the round off, tight body shape.
Mhm.
To do that, to take that action, how would you need to feel? What's a one word emotion that would fuel taking that action?
Punch.
Sorry, like a actual emotion word. So that's your cue word
Oh,
would be
okay.
punch, but an
Emotion.
actual emotion. So now we're doing the thought model. So we're getting
Yeah,
to like, what is the emotion that would fuel that? And I can give you a few suggestions.
I think aggressive.
Aggressive. Love it. And for those of you who are listening, you can use determined, motivated, focused. One of my favorites for making a change is curious. Like I'm
Mm,
curious to see if putting my feet behind me a little more will help my set.
yeah,
Because your brain then gives less frustration to the outcome. It's like, well, I was just
right.
curious to check out what was going to happen.
Yeah.
So, but aggressive. So to feel aggressive right before you go, what would you think?
I'm strong or I am powerful.
Yeah, yeah. Or we might stay like really like giving our brain that cue. I am going to aggressively put my feet behind me and punch.
Yeah.
So giving our brain that instruction. So I want you to visualize with me. I want you to
Mhm.
imagine you're standing at the end of the floor and you run and and right before you go, you think, I am going to aggressively put my feet slightly behind me. So ready, set, go. How did the skill go?
Fabulously.
Okay. And that can be a good cue of if we're on the right track, because sometimes your brain actually knows, actually that's not gonna help. And you'll be like, no, I still saw me making this other mistake, and then we can go down that road. But when you
Yeah.
kind of can visualize it and you can see it working, your brain is putting it together.
I think one piece of it that still didn't work quite properly is I didn't mention it before, but I need to be able to spot the fall and, like, kind of leave my head behind me out of the 1.5 and then into the front layout. And that's something that
Interesting.
I've been working on, and I struggle with it a little bit,
Okay.
seeing that ground, and
I
that's a
love
head
it.
thing.
Yes. So this is perfect because that's probably the actual thing you need to do. And that's where I love it, when you visualize and you still and then your brain picks out and it's like, "Actually, it's this." So that's super helpful.
With
So,
both.
yes, you gotta do I mean, that's the thing about gymnastics, right? You're thinking
Yeah.
about literally 10 things at once, but our brain needs some really specific cues to focus on each time, and I wanna go back to the frustration that you were experiencing. One of the things that happens when we make a change, one of the reasons I love to use the emotion of curious is because we make a change and it changes things. And
Yeah.
sometimes, and yet even almost always, that change doesn't always immediately fix everything because usually we were compensating for that change that needed to be made by doing something else. So then we
Mm,
make the change and it does improve the thing we needed it to improve, then we also have to change a few other things before the it's like, oh gosh, what are those called? The
domino.
Yeah, it's like a domino effect. You make one change and then you've got about 3 or 4 other small changes that you have to make for it to all come together. But what happens is we make the one change, it doesn't quote unquote work. We start to get frustrated and then we can't actually be the scientist evaluating what's happening. What else do I need to change? Okay, that worked, but this happened. And so one of the things I wanna like, that's super helpful is when you're trying to make a change, expect things might get a little funky that day,
Yeah,
right? Like, kids often this happens so much on being. They make a change, it improves the skill, but then they keep falling.
right.
And they're like, "Okay, never mind." But it's like, "No, you've been extra over squaring your hips at the end to compensate for the fact that you were, you know, wiggly in the air or whatever, you were like, like I'm not thinking of a good example, but like you've been doing something to compensate for this thing. Now that you change the thing, you don't need to compensate anymore. But you got to
Right.
practice all of it together. And so when we go in to make a change, we expect things might get a little wonky. It might not all work together, but I'm going to be a scientist. Every single turn that happens, I'm going to be like, okay, now what happened on that turn? We love to use the scientific method where you're literally like, okay, I observed that what happened on this turn is like, what's one of the things that happened?
I went kersplat.
I
I
went
was
kersplat.
and I was so far over on the landing that my front layout went boom, flat to my back, like, could not have been flatter. I think my arms were up, like, it was hilarious, and it was so startling. I just immediately started laughing hysterically because I was fine. But my teammates were like, "Oh my god,"
What
and we just
happened?
a little bit, but it was funny. I was like, "Wow, I am so bad." It's like, how am I a Florida Gator? Everybody else here can do this skill. I've been doing it for years, and now I can't even do this easy pass. And of course, that's not the case, but it's easy to let your mind go there. And I was feeling like a total basket case. Like I should have been a level 7. Not that there's anything wrong with level 7, but I was a level 7 um 12 years ago, and I was like, I haven't improved since then.
See, do you love how your brain took that one thing and, like, ran with it?
Yeah,
Yeah, and that's what happens when we try to make a change, but we wanna, supervise our brain and bring it back and be like, "No, I not that I wanna go kersplat, but making a change changes things, that's to be expected, now let's figure it out,"
yeah.
you know? So, what do you think happened on the time you went kersplat, the first one? If you had to go back and say, "My hypothesis is I observed I went kersplat. My
Yeah.
hypothesis is that what caused it?"
Um, I don't know. They
You
just were
had to
getting
guess.
worse. That was the last one.
Okay.
Um, I was really whipping my 1.5 a lot, but it was low, and I definitely wasn't punching right. And then I couldn't see anything. I had no idea where I was. I definitely was not spotting the full or the ground. So I was a bit discombobulated when I punched, and
What do you
it
think was the cause?
uh I think it was the round off set part.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. So we haven't had so then this is what we can do in that situation is like we when we take away the drama, right? Of, well, now I'm not good enough and oh my gosh, I'm trying to like I'm assuming your brain went, I'm trying to get in the lineup and now I can't even do the pass. What the heck is happening to me? Like
Exactly,
when
yeah.
we take away the drama and we just decide to be a scientist and we're like, okay, I observe I went kersplat. My hypothesis is the cause was my set and my round off.
Yeah.
And I whipped a little harder than normal. And my hypothesis is that didn't help me. So this time,
Conclusion, it did not help me. It
so
definitely
my
didn't work.
so now I'm gonna make a
Conclusion.
hypothesis that, getting my feet slightly behind me and not whipping as hard will help. I'm curious to see if that will help me, and I'm gonna go
Mhm.
run another experiment
Yeah.
and see what happens. Okay, I
Mhm.
ran that experiment. I still went kersplat, but I noticed that I at least figured out where I was in the air. And so my observation is, my hypothesis is, and what we try to do, and this is so hard, but what we try to do is instead of getting in the drama of it, we just continue to observe it like a scientist without making it mean all of these things. And one of the easiest ways to do that is if you go in knowing, I'm going to try to make a change. And when I try to make a change, things are going to probably get a little
Mhm.
funky. And so I'm going to be a scientist. I'm going to lab. Like you're in college, I'm going to a lab class. All I'm doing is running experiments for I'm going to run however 10 experiments. I'm going to run 20 experiments. And every single time I'm going to gather some data, I'm going to make an observation. I'm going to be a scientist.
Totally.
And the easiest way is to be like, okay, what's the one thing I think I need to do? And especially with a gymnast as experienced as you are, you usually actually do know when you're removing the drama. And
Mm,
so the interesting part is your brain actually came up with at the very end, what I actually need to do is where I spot.
right. But I do think that my key issue might be the punch, because I will not be able to spot if
Yeah,
I set badly and
totally.
am in this weird sending it back shape with my head, like, kind of tucked in. and
Yeah,
that takes away the possibility of spotting. So if I were to try to spot and I did the same punch, I wouldn't be able to do it. But if I fix the punch, then I'll be able to do the spot correctly
love it.
and take it to fall into
Yeah.
place.
So these are all great. We came up with like 3 or 4 hypotheses to
Yeah,
try today, right? So today we're gonna try our shape on our round off. We're gonna try, how fast we whip it over. We're gonna pay attention to our and each one, just try one at a time. Because the thing is when you try an experiment, if you change too many variables at once, you don't know which variable actually helped you.
yes.
So you try one thing at a time, and then you might be like, "Okay, well, that fixed this, but then now I still see this issue." And then you try that. You just keep going as a scientist until you figure it out.
Totally.
Feel the
Well, I
difference?
will update you how it
Like,
goes
I'm
next time
excited to
we
hear it.
chat.
Yeah.
I hope that I figure it out. I think it was
And
just a
coming back to having a bad day, it usually is this thing that we just talked about. It's when we start making something mean all these big things instead of letting it mean the one thing,
yeah.
right? So, what if you were a scientist, what would you make it mean?
I would observe that I have some areas that I can improve my technique on my singular pass on floor,
Yeah.
and there's one particular skill that's troubling me a little bit, and I'm going to reframing mode, but that doesn't mean that
Yeah.
the rest of the practice, the rest of the day is totally, uh, a wash and is gonna be bad as well.
Yeah. That was perfect. And you did that, right? To get yourself back into being, which was exactly what you need to do is when you don't make it mean everything's disaster, you just like, oh, I'm having trouble on one skill.
Yeah,
And I
and I
even wanna, like, dive into that a tiny bit more. One of the things that you said is you've been doing this pass for a long time, but it's never been a star pass. What do you mean by that?
it's always been, like, alright, like, it was consistent, going through the motions, making it, but kind of it was very likely I was gonna get a 10th deduction on it every time,
Yeah,
and if you look at how the pass is supposed to be done and how I did it, it's like, "Oh, well, that was okay," but
yeah. And were you
the next
competing it previously?
yeah, I've competed it for many years, but this year, I actually was trying to get rid of it because it's kind of that pass that's a little bit ugly, and I didn't have it in my routine this year
Okay.
until I tweaked my ankle, and then we were like, "Well, I can do this other pass that
Yeah,
I'm not quite as good at, but it might protect my body a little bit better," and so I brought it back into the routine. I've only been doing it for a couple of weeks,
yes.
since I hadn't done it since last year.
Yeah. So that's the other thing too to be, like, more scientist instead of drama is let's tell our brains the truth about it. Like your brain was like, I've been doing this past forever. I should be able to do it. What's wrong with me? That's not actually the truth. The truth is two things. One, you have a goal this year on floor. What is that goal?
Well, I need to re rethink the goal a little bit because the goal is not possible, but
Okay.
I want to compete for
Okay.
and do it really well, nail it
So
on
your
the knee.
goal before was a 10 on floor this year. Are you saying you're not a 10 start
Yeah,
value? So it's not
that
possible?
no, that was a goal. One of my goals was to be an All-American on floor,
Okay.
um, but there's not enough meets left, unless
Okay.
actually it is possible because if I were to compete at nationals and get in the top 8, which wouldn't happen with my routine that I'm doing now necessarily, but maybe I'll be back with my double pike by that time.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is possible.
Okay.
My primary goal though would be to have a really consistent floor routine and be a good option for my team at
Yeah.
meets and,
Yeah.
get to compete it.
Yeah.
Given that part is a little bit out of my control, but hopefully my
Right.
coaches will give me a chance at some
And
point.
beyond that, your goal is to get a 10.
Yeah, do it perfect.
So, in order to be in a position to accomplish those goals, a 10th built-in deduction is no longer something you're willing to have,
Yeah.
right?
If I have a 10th built-in deduction, I probably won't even make the lineup.
Right.
So, I
Yeah.
wanna fix it very
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. So let's tell our brain the truth about that instead of the like, I should be able to do this. I've been doing it forever. And it's like, well, no, you've been doing it forever in a way that isn't any longer conducive to our goals. And so that's why we're doing the work to change it. Because your brain is probably going to tell you, let's just go back to doing how we were. At least we were landing those. And it's like, no, we can get there. We can do the work. It's just going to take some experimentation to figure it out and get it. And you may have even already done that. But if you haven't, 2, 3 days of practice in order to get rid of a 10th deduction, totally worth it. Right.
Yeah,
And so,
definitely. When
yeah,
you put it like that, it seems like such a small thing,
yeah.
even though it can be so frustrating in the moment.
And
I
it's
think
only frustrating because your brain thinks you should be able to have it like that, and that if you can't, there's a problem. But if you
right,
go in with the expectation, whenever you try to make a change on something you've been doing for a long time, there's a domino effect, and you have to figure out the right dominoes. It's like it's a domino in a puzzle. You gotta figure out how the puzzle like, if you're gonna take out a puzzle piece, you gotta figure out how to put the other puzzle pieces back together in a way that works, and that
yeah,
takes a little massaging, it takes a little changing. When you go in with that expectation, it's not even frustrating. You're just like, "Alright, I'm here for it, it's lab time."
yeah,
Right?
definitely. I
Yeah.
think the part of it that's a little bit tricky is the time crunch,
Mhm.
and that brings a bit of extra stress into the situation. For example, this week, we really only had 2 days of practice between the last meet and our next meet of doing floor,
Yeah,
and it's like, "Alright, I basically have 1 day to figure this out because then I need to do it better on the practice before the meet."
yeah,
Uh, and it's like, "Okay, I have to completely change what I'm doing and get consistent on it in 1 day of a 30, 40-minute floor rotation." So, I think that put a little bit of pressure on
yes.
me, and I was
Yeah, when
thinking
you
about
think, "I have to make this change in one day," how do you feel?
a little bit frantic and antsy,
Yeah.
like, I can do it, it's possible, I know I'm physically capable of this, I've made corrections before, I am a powerful enough gymnast with a good enough air awareness to do a strong 1.5 front layout, it's not a hard pass. I think that's the big assumption that's frustrating me, is this is an easy pass, and it's not easy for me, and so I feel like I should be doing it well because it doesn't take a lot of effort,
Yeah.
but it takes a lot of focus, and I'm like, "Ah, I
Well,
gotta get this."
it does take a lot of focus, but it also like, at least my observation, and I don't coach at the collegiate level, but my observation is changing how your round off turns over, changing how your back handspring, like where you get your feet, are two of the hardest changes to make. So, for instance, when little kids go from learning a round off back handspring to round off two back handsprings, they're like, I can already do a back handspring. So, why can't I get the second back handspring? And they don't understand that the
Mm,
actual physics of changing getting their feet behind them to stop their movement backwards versus scooping underneath, it's a
yeah,
completely different skill. And they've been doing the other skill, the round off with their or the back handspring with their feet behind them for a long time.
yeah,
And so their brain is confused. So for you, changing from normal back passes where your round off is scooping feet in front of you to a pass where you're actually round off feet behind you
Mhm.
is difficult.
For sure. And I feel, again, like I should be able to do this. I've made those changes before. I know
And
how to
you
do different types of
can,
round-offs.
right?
And,
You
I
totally
guess
can.
it's confidence boosting that, "Oh, I totally can do this." It's just a matter of figuring out. But it's also a bit I keep coming back to the word frustrating, like, "Oh, I haven't figured it out yet, and it should be easy." And I'm feel
Well,
like
and
I should stop saying
let's
should.
think through those thoughts. It should
Yeah,
be easy, I haven't figured it out. It causes you to feel frantic and frustrated.
yeah,
So your brain wants you to focus on those thoughts. It just how your brain works. But those thoughts don't serve you in any way to get it.
yeah,
So your brain wants to argue for like, no, but this is just true. I should be able to figure it out. It should be easy. But it's those very thoughts that are causing the frantic, not able to drop in and actually figure it out. Because
yeah.
what do you need to do to figure it out?
Just act like a scientist
Yeah,
and run those
yeah.
experiments and
You need to
keep
not be frantic. You need to be calm and determined and focused and aggressive and curious, right?
each other.
All of those emotions are probably going to drive you to figure it out in one practice.
Yeah.
So what if we
Focusing
had the
more.
thought that is like, I can figure it out in one practice. I just have to stay calm and focused.
Yeah, feels doable.
Yeah, it is doable, right? Yeah, we just have to not let it start meaning something that it doesn't, and your brain is still gonna want to, so then it's like, you gotta imagine you're herding cats. Your brain's like, "No, no, no," and you're like, "Hey, come back this way." Your brain's like, "Da, da, da," you're like, "Come back this way." You're just gonna have to keep pulling it back every time so you can stay calm and focused with the time you have.
Sounds good. I feel much better about it
You got it.
now, and we'll see what happens tomorrow at practice, but I'm gonna go in with a good attitude, and I will bring back the 1.5 front layout update.
Yeah. So what do you think is the number one thought that will help you do that tomorrow?
I think it's the just punch aggressively.
Yeah. So the one other thing that I want to bring into this is visualization. So when we are short on practice time, every single visualization that we do is a turn. Our brain, like all the same neural pathways light up as when we actually do the skill. So
Yeah.
you can do some work on even like running the experiments with visualization of like, okay, if I
Mhm.
made this change, what do I think would happen? And then like play it through. Okay, if I made this change and kind of getting down and then we've gotten to this one that you think really is it. So like take 10 turns today
Yeah,
doing it that way. Take 10 turns again in the morning doing it that way in your head and that actually speeds up the practice time incredibly.
for sure. I feel like I've visualized it at least 25 times during this coaching session, so we got in a lot of good reps.
We got a lot of reps in today. I love
Yes,
that.
and my body feels great. I didn't curse splat 25 times.
It's a lot easier to make the changes in our head without
Sometimes.
damaging our body.
Visualization can be tough, but
Yeah,
one thing that helps me a lot is visualizing how other people do it if
yes,
I wanna do it that way,
yeah,
and I've been trying to do that a little bit as
yeah.
well, and hopefully that
Well,
will help.
and visualization is still it's the model is still operating. The thought model is still operating. So one of the things that happens, and I don't think this is what's happening to you, but you just said visualization is tough. So I just wanted to like throw this in really quick. is that one of the things that happens when people struggle with visualization is they're still operating out of thoughts and feelings that aren't serving them. So when you're still feeling frantic and pressed for time, but you're trying to, even that, you're like, I don't have enough time. I got to visualize. And you're still feeling frantic. You're still operating out of frantic in your head. And so you're still going to get the results out of frantic. So you have to
Yeah,
do both the thought work of getting to the right thoughts and feelings that are going to serve you and fuel you, and then you'll be able to visualize really well and successfully. So just a
interesting.
side note.
Cool.
All right.
Thank
Can't
you.
wait to hear all about it. All
Sounds
right.
good.